means for your world. Insignificance. This is the legacy of humanity. The Mother Soul must. We that dreamed. We in nightmare. We that are one. The red fire blooms. We control. They dance. We that fail.
What's good, y'all? It's Zylar. If you're coming over from the Max Roll Guide, I want you to take away at least this. In order to get this build really functioning, to feel good and comfy, and able to do all the content, as you saw that I showcased at the beginning, with about that much ease, all you need is at least 500 spirit and plus 30 total to the gem level of your Frost Mages. How you achieve that, it's really up to you. There's a few flexible pieces for that. I think what's locked in is a plus 3 Trench Timber. It's a fairly cheap item at plus 3. You can buy them corrupted. Makes it easy. Plus 2 Minion Helmet. This item is fairly flexible. There's tons of them at plus 2. Even a decent, well-rolled one at this point, it's not more than a Divine. Maybe 2. And the pain points of getting these last few levels will come down to a few options. One, you can get a plus 4 Scepter. I don't advise it. I would highly recommend just the most amount of spirit as you can get out of your Scepter before you're investing more and more into the character and staying at plus 3, as this item is the one that can give you the most amount of spirit. Whereas the neck, I would stay at a 2. Stay at a 2. But depending on the market and depending how good of a neck you can find, if all the plus 2s seem really expensive and you need a lot of with the other stats and suffixes that you need for your character, I would recommend just biting the bullet, getting a plus 20 gem, and getting a plus 1 necklace that has peak suffixes for your character and spirit, if that's also what's bottlenecking you from that 500 breakpoint. Basically, this is the peak flexible item in terms of cost benefit, working around which gem level you are using for your Frost Mage. Basically, the Frost Mage at 20 is very easy to get to at least 30, right? I could take this neck off and it's still 30 due to the rest of my gear. Like I said, you're dropping this to 3, so it would be 29. So minus 1 from the Scepter, we're at 32. Minus 1 from the neck, 31. And then most people are running at a 19. It's the generally easiest peak skill gem to get. I myself even haven't dropped the 20 yet. I bought mine on trade. So you minus the 19, you need at least a plus 2 neck and a plus 3 Scepter to hit 30. The breakpoint that honestly has made me addicted to continuing to play the Minion character, as it's just so easy and comfy to run through these maps doing high breach delirium content and just not having any like issue, not struggling. Everything's frozen, everything's chilled, and on top of that, everything's slowed, because what I'm doing, as opposed to what I've seen other people do where they're self-casting the curse, which is admittedly just strictly better on bossing. If you really want to like juice that montage, you really want to juice your boss kills and make them go as fast as possible, you can opt to take out the Blasphemy setup, use a cursed round setup, get like 60% minus cold res just from one hypothermia on top of the exposure, and you'll kill that boss instead of 7 seconds in about 5 or 4. But as you can see in the clips, I'm always running Blasphemy. It's comfy. It makes it easier to set up a sigil of power beforehand with a staff, dropping your clerics, unless you're going to do what I've opted to do, which is just drop the clerics entirely, and in mapping, just use blink instead, which makes it a bit cleaner. And then dropping the spamming SRS to get the spamming flame wall to get the SRS out. What I really like about Blasphemy, though, isn't even just the quality of life and comfiness at the cost of the efficacy of the curse. It also allows you to run this. Enemies you curse are hindered with 15% reduced movement speed. Now, I've done some really degenerate stuff. I've corrupted a hypothermia that I qualityed to 20, and then once it hit, I upgraded it to level 20. And at that point, it's a plus 23 gem using cold mastery and the plus cold skills that we have for our frost mages up here. But more realistic, just rock minus 37 res instead of trying to go for minus 40 like I have. Take this node, and instead of using cold mastery here, by the way, if you opt to do what I'm doing, it's totally fine. You can just use Minion mastery in the gem swap for your frost mages that I'll cover later, as opposed to using cold mastery, as we have a plethora of gems we can use for that. But again, and if you've 6-linked, then yeah, you're using cold mastery for hypothermia at all times. Because you're investing that hard into the Blasphemy, yeah, cold mastery just belongs to your hypothermia support. Or the hypothermia curse, excuse me. Now, with a 6-link, or opting to drop cold mastery, you can run encumbrance, which makes the debuffs inflicted with supported skills have 15% increased slow magnitude. That, combined with the hindered, which is why it's even doing a movement speed debuff, nothing's moving. Like, you're in a breach, you're not going to get swarmed, you're not going to get overran, you're not going to get overwhelmed, because if you have at least 2.5k ES overflowed to 5k, you have your frost mages doing their casts, chilling, freezing on top of everything around you, getting slowed, and have an increased effect of that slow due to encumbrance. Nothing around you is moving. You're able to just run straight forward and have your Blasphemy curse apply to anything that's near you. Your frost mages aren't too far behind. They'll hit those things before they present any real danger. And it, again, leads to that really comfy mapping that allows you to farm high tier breach with layers of delirium on top for rarity or increased rare monsters, and make pretty good currency as a minion character. And if you don't want to even do any of this and you want to focus on bossing, you can just drop all these curse nodes. I guess you would take more ES nodes. You don't really need them. You don't need defense. The bosses are dying before they get to do anything. But if you wanted more offense, you could invest in accuracy for the SRS that you're spawning from Flame Wall, some crit dam bonus here. Maybe you annoyed. Honestly, pressing for damage is pretty difficult. You could keep the investment into the effective curses, and that would still be good. The bosses are dying so quickly that you probably can just, who gives a fuck, this 25% reduced duration of curse, whatever. But again, the fact that the mapping setup has the boss kill speeds that you saw in the intro, you really want to do any of that? Unless you're exclusively bossing and you're trying to min-max your divines per hour, it's just, that's a whole level of just min-maxing. I just don't think it's necessary, and isn't gonna, you know, maybe you don't want to do a boss and you want to go back to doing maps, or you want to do a second trial and you're gonna be like, oh fuck, let me change my whole setup to something that feels a lot better, and so I can incorporate something like Blink into my build again, right? So again, main details: 500 spirit, level 30 to the mages. How you get it with either a 20 gem, +2 neck, it's up to you, whatever you can afford. And everything else you see in the max roll guide really just comes to finding those prefixes that I specified as best as you can for your budget, while meeting the res cap and attribute requirements for your build. That's why in the max roll thing, I didn't really put any attributes / reses, because you really can search for any combination of those things on all of these items in order to meet your goals. I have a pair of 35% increased movement speed boots. Honestly, you can go with 25. We're a fucking minion character. We're kind of relegated to how fast our minions are even able to keep up with us to begin with. So being a bit slower doesn't matter too much. Now, specifically, I'll briefly go over the gems for those of you who didn't want to read through the max roll guide. So if you're still here and listening to this, that's probably why. So let's go ahead and look at it. We don't have PoE, so there's no mathematical perfect calculator for this so far. But for the moment, I'm running LE Focus, Heft, Martial Tempo, Fire Infusion, Immolate. Now, tons of more multipliers. This gem is just broken. It was broken on the Arsonists who weren't doing who were doing some portion of his damage, and it's broken on the SRS. Now that we're not using the Arsonists, it's no brainer. Pop it over. I would specify that if you're running on a 3-link and you don't have the additional 2 links yet, I think the core of their damage is Heft, Martial Tempo, and Fire Infusion. Just because on a lower budget, or as you're trying to build up into this build, things might not be as consistently ignited as you'd like. You know, it's not as much of a well-oiled machine. So leaving out the conditional damages and letting them still ignite for a little bit longer is what I would recommend. As soon as you upgraded to a 4-link though, even before a 5-link, I would swap out Fire Infusion because we're going to add LE Focus, and until you get the 6th-link back, I would keep Fire Infusion out of your links. Immolate's just stronger, and once you put in LE Focus, they're not able to ignite anyways, so it's a no-brainer to just give them Immolate. Blasphemy, Hypothermia, Heightened Curse, Ritualistic Curse to increase the AoE, increased effect, and this is to plus the levels. Hypothermia Curse has some weird level break points where it gives curse duration, or it goes another tier of minus res, or it has increased radius. And specifically at this breakpoint, a +1 level 20 with 20% effect with Cold Mastery and +1 all cold skills that we're taking not only for our Frost Mages but this curse, it does hit that next breakpoint that's allowing me to apply a 39% minus res to most enemies. I might buy some jewels, get more curse effect, and try to get that to 40. But again, you don't need that. Anything above 35 is more than good enough. Pain Offering. We still have Font of Rage from when we were using Arsonists. That works for the SRS, but honestly, I would just go for Font of Clarity. Mana regen's just gonna feel more comfy. Font of Rage, if you really want to min-max the damage, it does do something for the SRS, so it's up to you. Storm Mages, the same support Storm Mages that are in every Infernalist build because we have the freest sources of Ignite to apply that ever existed. Lightning Mastery makes them do a bit more damage. Lightning Pin, that we have no exposure, so if anything has lightning res and we want it to get shocked, they need this. But the core, that again I would use with only a 3-link, is the more chance to shock, less shock duration, and then Stormfire to cheat the fact that we have cut the shock duration in half. Because infinite shocks, because everything's ignited. Flame Wall and the Hellhound will very commonly ignite. Anything the Hellhound's near will be counted as ignited, and anything it's in your Flame Wall will be ignited. Eye of Winter, you just give it Unleash. You don't cast it. You don't spam cast this. You cast it occasionally, probably every 2 to 3 Flame Walls to get out your 10 to 11 Raging Spirits. And by the time you've done that, you'll have 1 to 2 charges. So this just gives you really good coverage. And as long as a single one of the projectiles from Eye of Winter crits, it will apply cold exposure with increased effect with Strip Away. There's no need to run Frostbomb. Technically, Frostbomb would be slightly increased effect of the exposure. But again, it's about making the build play well, play smoothly. And reducing the gym links just allows you to incorporate something like Sigil of Power, Blink, or just run a Skeletal Cleric, depending on what spirit breakpoints you're at. Grim Feast, we have ES, and we have a lot of spirit. So we put on Grim Feast, yep, just like everybody else. Yep. Quick little edit. I forgot to talk about the Frost Mages in the Frost Mage video guide. Yeah. Anyways. Bosses, Conk Effect, Minion Mastery, or cold mastery. It doesn't matter. Either or works for the plus level. We're just using, like I said before, the cold mastery for blasphemy support, which you might not need depending on your investment in the hypothermia and the curse effect on the tree, plus blasphemy, the origin itself. Outside of that, one thing that I noticed is after testing some shit before recording this today, fork, I'm not sure on if you need fork in the clear setup. You'll see in the breach run, for instance, me swap both gems. But I'm starting to feel that once you have a certain amount of frost mages, fork becomes unnecessary for clear, and you're better off just running minion mastery. I'm not certain. If you're below 10 frost mages, maybe 9, and you try using minion mastery and it doesn't feel good for you, or the clear gets substantially worse, I would continue to run fork with wild shards, and maybe at post 10, 11 frost mages, just running minion mastery is more than good enough. But definitely at a 5 link, you're running wild shards for clear, and then you swap it for minion mastery when you get to a boss. And then at a 6 link, wild shards and minion mastery / fork, depending on how many mages you have, I believe, for mapping and clear. And then minion mastery plus conk effect for bosses. Currently, I believe that this FrostFire mages build is pretty much the peak of what we have available at the moment for minions. You might be able to achieve higher damage output with a Doriani's prototype Storm Mage setup at the cost of defensiveness and quality of life. But in terms of an overall boss killing, mapping, leveling, just to reduce how often you're dying, I don't think it gets any better than the Frost Mages. Simply put, they can do it all. They do take roughly 25 or 26 to come online at least. Up until that point, I'd highly recommend just sticking with Arsonists. But once you hit level 26, at that point, I highly recommend pivoting it over to Frost Mages. I will also highly recommend a Blasphemy Aura setup, as it will make it a lot smoother to actually do the rest of the gameplay, keeping up the SRS, keeping things exposed with Eye of Winter, dropping pain offerings for difficult rares spawn, just lowering the amount of button play that you have in general, which tends to align with what minion players want to begin with. With all that said, you can see that my rarity, my character, is 172%. This has felt pretty good for me. Some people say that you should go up to 200%. Some people say 150. Some people say you just need 100. Some people say you start getting divines, like 10 divines per hour when you break 500. I personally would recommend at least 80, somewhere between 80 to 120. Shoot for that as a goal while acquiring gear. You don't need the Vinters. You don't need an Ingenuity. You don't need to use a gold amulet. But try to get 80 to 120, especially if you plan to do breaching, if you plan to do any other form of high tier mapping with rarity. I believe it's relevant for bosses, so even there it might be fairly significant. Unless you're going to be spamming Ultimatum and Sekima trials, I definitely wouldn't want to be going around with 0% rarity at the moment. In closing, and my final thoughts, a lot of the optimization for your damage will come down to buying pretty decent Sapphire jewels. The jewel socket nodes per node spent are highly effective, highly efficient, and a lot of value. You can see I literally just spent 3 levels traveling to this because each jewel socket that is within reach is worth going for. But I would like to specify and again warn, like I did in my timeless jewel video, the best jewels for minions, and likely a lot of other builds, but certainly for minions, just as it was in PoE 1, are these time lost jewels. What they can do in terms of scaling your damage is honestly not even comparable to a lot of the other jewel sockets that you buy here. For instance, this is giving me 12% crit hit chance. You could get one that gives you 10 per notable in range. And if I put it here, it would give, if I really wanted 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, I could even justify taking something like this. It could give me nearly 60, roughly 60% crit hit chance. Not to mention it could also be an attack and cast speed one, which would then also be giving me 18%, 19% attack and cast speed, which is literally double what this wheel does right here. So those jewels are bonkers for minions, but unfortunately they are damn near impossible to search for at the moment. They are very annoying. You will spend pretty much all of your free time, unless you are playing this game like it is a job, to find and acquire these ones that are even kind of okay for your build. They won't even be optimal, as they'll have something jank about them that's not great. Anything that was perfect, like maximum energy shield or minion damage plus large radius plus these notables, would be upwards of 50 to 60 divines. And I cannot advise more against even looking anywhere in their direction. Something like this, for instance, which is very nice, allows me to get more spirit. With the life increases, I literally would not have enough spirit otherwise to do what I'm currently doing. With the life increases on this unique jewel, and the maximum fire res increase for my reses, you don't need to go out of your way trying to get 10, 12 KES. You can instead do things like playing into your ascendancy and capping your chaos res and overcapping your fire max res, so that even more of the damage that is cold and lightning gets converted through to your fire res, 20% of it, further reducing that damage, and also just reducing fire damage in general. And I gotta say, I feel like I have 1/3 to 1/4 of the amount of ES I see people rocking, running around in maps all the time. But in terms of dying and leveling, I'm just kind of cruising. I went from 94 to 95.5. I've died once or twice trying to showcase or test some things on bosses with different minions. But were I not doing that, I'd probably be 96, if not 97. If you do end up deciding to cut the cleric, it is very, very important, and I would highly advise to drop things like taking glaciation, drop things like taking minion crit damage and necrotic touch. Probably not necrotic touch. This is pretty significant. Definitely the crit damage. Path your tree through here, and then opt out of taking here, here, and here. You'll gain another point that way. And just instead try to make sure your minions are res capped and have as much extra life as you can afford. Without the skeletal cleric, if your damage isn't quite there yet, you will run into some difficulties. That's just my forewarning if you decide to also opt out of the skeletal cleric like I have. But that'll pretty much cover it for the video. If you have any more questions about frost mages, when you should go to them, what you should be doing with the arsonists, if you want to see whether or not you could potentially have them come online a lot sooner and just start them in low tier maps, if that's something you guys are interested in or like to see or like to know more of, leave a comment down below, like and subscribe, and just give me feedback if you found this was helpful. That'll do it for this video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.
my plan.
We that dreamed, we in nightmare, we that are one. The red fire blooms. We control, they dance. We that fade.